Again, we are describing, based on the notion that the Sephiros can be configured in the tzura of a human body. So the Rosh is the Sefira of Keser, the highest of God's manifestations. And then we subdivide the Rosh in different characteristics, the nose, the eyes, the ears, and the Ramak tries to show how we emulate. So we did the forehead, we did the ears. The eyes is the same idea. All of these is you only look for the good. Now, as I mentioned, there is an ambiguity. In other words, the same idea gets repeated. See no evil, hear no evil, do no evil. Your eyes should only see good. Your ears should only hear good. But as I say, there are different meanings of what that means. What does it mean that you should try to endeavor to hear only good things? You should try to endeavor to see only good things. Right? That's the buzzword here. See good things, hear good things, think good things. But as I say, there's a little bit of an ambiguity, or actually both are true. Does that mean, look at people favorably, see their zechus? Remember I mentioned from Chaim Shmulevitz, what is the meaning of judging people l'kaf zechus? Because Avos Rabbi Nassan says, if you judge people l'kaf zechus, Hashem will judge you l'kaf zechus. And I had mentioned Rav Chaim Shmulevitz's very excellent question. If judging l'kaf zechus means gives people the benefit of the doubt, Hashem doesn't have a doubt. How can Hashem judge me l'kaf zechus? Hashem knows if I'm doing a sin or I'm not. So Rav Chaim explains that l'kaf zechus does not mean giving you the benefit of the doubt, but it means in all of our actions there is a mixture of good and evil. What do I focus on? Right? So that's what Chazal are saying. If I judge people l'kaf zechus by focusing on their good, Hashem will judge me l'kaf zechus. So on one level, seeing good, hearing good refers to that capacity of trying to see the good in people, hear the good in people. But then I'd mentioned there's an abstract idea that you don't expose yourself to things that are degrading, demeaning, and the like, meaning you only want to fill your head with good things, meaning things that ennoble you, things that improve your midos, things that make you a better person, things that connect you to Hashem. Meaning it's not just seeing the good in other people, it's not just an interpersonal idea, but it's the idea of what do you want to have in your head. Now, since your head is influenced by your eyes and by your ears, what you hear and what you see. So you want to control what you hear and what you see in order that your mind should be filled with ruchnius, with good things. Right? So I say it's a little bit of an ambiguity because sometimes the Ramak is emphasizing looking at people and seeing the good. Other times he's emphasizing just focus on good things, on noble things. Now, I'll give you an example. I once read about somebody's Zaidi who was a gadol. I don't remember who the gadol was, but here in Yerushalayim, that whenever cars drove by on Shabbos, the person said, so many goyim in Yerushalayim, so many goyim. Now, he didn't mean to say, as unfortunately people talk today, the Jew who drives on Shabbos is a guy. He didn't mean that. He meant to say, these must be non-Jews who are driving. Why? Because even though he knew in a sense that plenty of Jews must be driving, first of all, you can even tell by the license plate, Israeli license plates versus Arab license plates. I mean, they're different license plates. But if he would have incorporated on a conscious level that Jews are being Mechalel Shabbos, number one, he would have thought poorly of some Jews. And number two, his appreciation for the holiness of Shabbos would be diminished a little bit. So he didn't want to characterize the situation as Jews being Mechalel Shabbos. In other words, he only wanted to see good. He didn't want to see bad because the bad would have affected him. It's a strange idea in some ways because after all, he knows the facts. If he were to think about it, he would know, but he didn't want to go there. He didn't want to move his mind to things that were negative and not ennobling in that way. Right? So these are ways that we emphasize the keser. So now we go to the nose, right? Because Sfiras Keser is the Rosh. And here we say that the nose is connected to anger. I'm not sure exactly why, but this is very true. The word for anger, or one of the words for anger, besides kas, is charon af. In fact, even the word af alone, in biblical Hebrew, the word af alone can stand for anger. Af v'chema are two words that are often used for anger. Now, chema, we understand the connection there, because chema is from cham. Cham is warm or hot. So when a person is upset, a person gets excited, they actually, they feel hot. Their temperature rises. Right? So chema is anger because when you're angry, you're hot. But why is af? Now, the word af means nose, like, N-O-S-E, nose, and it also means anger. So it's not clear. I don't have the clear understanding of the metaphor. I mean, sometimes I could imagine trying to reconstruct what happens when I get angry. Mipsari yachaseh aloka, right? Eov says, from my flesh I understand God. So by thinking about what happens to our bodies, we understand the process. But sometimes when you get angry, you may get a twitching in your nose or an itching in your nose. It probably comes from the body producing noxious chemicals or whatever it would be. And therefore, for whatever reason, in biblical metaphor, the af is the seat of anger, or at least it's an expression of anger. And therefore, when we talk about guarding your nose, we're not referring to what you smell, we are referring to controlling yourself from anger. Now, anger is a very hard thing. Anger is something that all of us are very prone to. And the Gemara says in Maseches Nedarim, Kol hakayes ki'ilu oved avodah zarah. One who is angry, it is as if they worship avodah zarah. Now, I understand anger is a very bad thing, but what is the connection between anger and idolatry? Why would anger be connected to avodah zarah? So the Baal HaTanya, Rav Shneur Zalman, the Alter Rebbe, offers the following explanation. Anger comes from the frustration when things did not turn out the way you expected them to turn out. You didn't get the thing that you wanted. Somebody didn't treat you right. Somebody didn't give you what they should have given you, or they did something bad to you. You get frustrated. You get angry. You expected something different. Now, let's go back to a story about David HaMelech. Do you remember when David HaMelech is running away from Avshalom, his own son that wants to kill him? So there's a man from the tribe of Binyamin whose name is Shimi ben Gera, who happens to be the ancestor of Mordechai, of Purim. And Shimi ben Gera is throwing rocks at David, throwing dirt at David, and saying, you're getting what you deserved. Because, you took away the Malchus from Shaul, you're getting what you deserve. And he cursed him. David HaMelech's a trigger-happy nephew general, maybe not trigger-happy, but sword-wielding happy, Yoav ben Tzruya, who was always very quick to go to the sword, wanted to kill Shimi ben Gera because Shimi ben Gera is a Mored b'Malchus. And indeed, he is Chayav Misa because he is rebelling against the king. But David HaMelech said the following. David HaMelech said the following idea. If God did not want me to suffer this humiliation, then this humiliation would not have happened. It is the will of God that I be shamed, that I be humiliated. Therefore, I must accept it. Now, this is a very interesting idea that the Chovos HaLevavos develops, and not everybody agrees. I'll go over the machlokas very quickly. The Chovos HaLevavos says, no human being, actually no animal, no force can harm a human being unless it is the direct will of God that human being be harmed. Now, that may not be true with animals, because this goes back to the idea that animals, plants, trees, are governed by what is called hashgacha kalalis. That means generalized providence, meaning God, with respect to them, created laws of nature, and nature will follow a certain path, and sometimes things will be destroyed, and sometimes things will be rebuilt. And God does not intervene. God lets things happen, but God will make sure it's not going to be too excessive. So if some virus is going to wipe out the whole animal kingdom, so God is going to stop. In other words, that's called klulus, meaning God does not care if a given cow lives or dies. But God cares that there be, I don't know, whatever it is, 500,000, I don't know how many cows, 500,000 cows in the world. So when you're kind of getting close to the line, God will step in to be sure that no more cows die. That's called klulus, because God's providence is not extending to the individual unit. It's extending to the overall picture. So there have to be trees, but not necessarily this tree. There has to be waterways, but not necessarily this waterway. So God kind of doesn't look at the picture. Nature happens. And at some point, God will say, well, I got to fix something because things are going out of balance. But that's with respect to animals and plants. But with respect to human beings, at least Jews, there is what we call hashgacha pratis, individualized divine providence. God doesn't only care that there be X number of humans in the world. God decrees what's going to happen to you, to me, to everybody, at least every Jew. And as a result, any humiliation, any harm, any shame, any death that a person undergoes was the direct will of God. Now, we don't know why. That doesn't mean, you're a Russia, but whatever it is, God decreed that this has to happen. Now, and this is the famous statement of the Chovos HaLevavos, that no one has the power to harm anybody else unless it is the will of God. Now, that does create enormous problems with free will. Because let's take a very simple example. You walk into a 7-Eleven at 2 o'clock in the morning, Saturday night, and there's a robber with a gun. Now, does the robber have free will to pull the trigger or not pull the trigger? 100% he has free will. So let's say he pulls the trigger and kills somebody. I mean, how do you understand that? On one hand, if God didn't want that person to die, he wouldn't have died. In other words, God decreed that this person die 2:15 a.m. Saturday night. God decreed that. It's going to happen. But on the other hand, the guy that pulled the trigger could have decided not to pull the trigger. God didn't make him pull the trigger. So what would have been if he would do tshuva the last minute and not pull the trigger? Well, what would have happened to the guy who was supposed to die at 2:15? Meaning, how can you say every harm that occurs was decreed by God, but the one who did the harm had free will not to do it? So, like the Chovos HaLevavos, you're forced into kind of a strange assumption. At 2:15 a.m., this guy was going to drop dead. If there happens to be a robber who shoots a gun, it's from the robber. If there's no robber, he'll have a heart attack or the roof is going to collapse on him. Meaning, he would die anyway. It's an amazing thing. According to Chovos HaLevavos, every single victim of murder, and when you extrapolate it to the Holocaust, you really get into strange scenarios. 6 million Jews were killed by Germans, Poles, Ukrainians, Hungarians, whoever was involved. Did they have bechira to kill or not to kill? Yes, they could have decided not to kill. Hitler could have been a Baal Tshuva. And yet, according to the Chovos HaLevavos, if Hitler would have decided not to kill, 6 million people would have dropped dead over, 12 years or whatever it is. Very strange. But this is what you might call, and this I don't mean this pejoratively, the fatalistic worldview of the Chayvus Halavavas, in which no human being suffers anything unless it was HaKadosh Baruch Hu's decision. I'll come to the other view in a moment. Chasidus very much follows this shita of the Chayvus Halavavas, and therefore the Baal HaTanya explains, going back to what I said, why is anger like idolatry? Because if I'm upset that I didn't get what I want, who am I upset? Who is upsetting me? If I truly believe that everything I get in the world is directly decided by God, then I couldn't be angry because in a sense you didn't hurt me. Yeah, you committed a sin in doing a bad thing to me. You had bechira, and you're going to be held accountable. You see, that's true. But you didn't hurt me. Amazing thing. Reuven murders Shimon. Reuven committed a tremendous avera. But Reuven didn't do anything to Shimon. I hope this makes sense. Reuven committed a sin, for sure. Hitler, eternal damnation or whatever, although I questioned in an earlier share the concept of eternal damnation. But whatever it is, Hitler is getting the worst din that one could imagine, for sure. But, in a sense, as strange as this is, he did not hurt us. It was Hashem's decree. For whatever reason, I'm not giving any reasons right now, but it was Hashem's decree.
So why is Hashem allowed to punish him?
Because he had free will. He had free will. In other words, if he wouldn't have done it, then something else would have happened. There would have been an earthquake. So nobody forced him. God's decree did not force him. God simply said, there's a decree, and whichever person chooses, that's his choice. So this is what David. The proof of this yesod is David HaMelech. David HaMelech says, if God didn't want me to be cursed, I wouldn't have been cursed. Shimi would have gone mute or whatever it would be. And therefore the Baal HaTanya says, anger is idolatry, because if you're angry because you didn't get something, then you don't believe that Hashem is decreeing this. You're believing other powers in the world are deciding, your next door neighbor or your chavrusa. That's avodah zarah, when you deny that everything comes from God. That's avodah zarah, right? Because that's kol hakayes ki'ilu oved avodah zarah. Again, a difficult idea to internalize, but this is the Chayvus Halavavas. Again, I'm going to mention some other views about this. That it's shayach, that nobody can hurt anybody. Nobody can do anything to me. It's only the will of Hashem. Now, just a little bit of a kasha on Shimi ben Gera. So this is an amazing thing. David HaMelech is being cursed. David HaMelech is being humiliated. And David HaMelech says it comes from God. Do nothing. Now, we have a problem. Let's go forward on David HaMelech's deathbed. Let's leave the book of Shmuel Beis and go to Malachim Aleph. And David is on his deathbed. David is cold and he needs to be warmed. And David has some final instructions to his son Shlomo. And here, David HaMelech says, remember Shimi ben Gera, who cursed me on the day I was running from Avshalom. Take care of him. Be sure he gets the punishment he deserves. And if you recall, Shlomo HaMelech in fact did kill Shimi ben Gera, or had him killed by a kind of a strange thing. The whole thing is strange. He told Shimi ben Gera that you're not allowed to leave the city. And Shimi ben Gera left the city to look for donkeys. Kind of stupid. He's being watched. He's getting executed. So, here's the thing. What happened? Did David HaMelech have a personality change? When Shimi ben Gera curses him, David HaMelech is a saint. David HaMelech says, it's the will of God I must accept. As he leaves the world, he tells Shlomo, be sure to get him. What's going on? What happened to the hashkafa that was expressed, the philosophy that was expressed in the book of Shmuel? So, I think the pshat might be this, that there's a difference between retaliation as a personal vendetta and punishment based on violation of divine law, meaning to say the following. In the heat of the moment, David was afraid that if he would allow retaliation against Shimei, it would be because of his personal anger and his personal pride. And David didn't want to act out of that particular motivation, because that would have been acting out of anger, and acting out of anger is avodah zarah. But years later, the assumption might be, David HaMelech is no longer angry. And now, objectively, he could say, Shimei is chayav misa, because he's mored b'malchus. In other words, David didn't want to act in the heat of the moment, because that would have been a personal vendetta. He waited until he no longer had that personal vendetta, so he wouldn't be acting out of anger. Shimei was chayav misa. He was a mored b'malchus. Shimei is chayav misa. But David didn't want to kill him at that point. It reminds me a little bit, some of you might know, maybe you've had the pleasure of meeting the Bosner Rebbe, Rav Meir Horowitz in Har Nof. You know, American guy, very, very nice person. I knew his father very well. His father was the Bosner Rebbe, as they call him. I mean, Rav Meir is the Bosner Rebbe now, and it's Rabbi Gottlieb's Rebbe. Rabbi Gottlieb was actually much closer to him than I was, but I also knew him very, very well. I was his Shabbos guest, along with 100 other people, many Shabboses, and the like. In fact, the Rebbe was a wonderful, wonderful person, but he had this thing that you don't make Kiddush between 6 and 7, because that's the constellation of Mars. It's a Midas Hadin in the world, so you never make Kiddush between 6 and 7. So, when you have 100 people for Shabbos, it takes a long time to settle, to get set up. So I remember, if davening was over at 5:45, there was a real mad rush to try to get Kiddush in 1 minute before 6, because once it hits 6 o'clock, you're going to have to wait until 7. They would never make Kiddush between 6 and 7. Okay, that's just an aside story. But the Bosner Rebbe used to tell the story that his father, who was the first Bosner Rebbe. Now you may wonder, how does somebody get to be Bosner Rebbe? So I thought, I get maybe Boston was some city in the Ukraine or something. No, but Boston Rebbe is the Boston, Massachusetts. His father was not a Rebbe. His father came from Yichus, and his father was a big Talmid Chacham. He came to Boston around World War I, and there were many different Hasidic Yidden from different groups of Hasidim who didn't have a Rebbe. There was no Hasidus. So he became like the Rebbe for the refugees. And that's why you'll often find with Bosner Hasidim, maybe less so today, there is a dual affiliation. So, you're a Bosner Chassid, but you're also a Gerer Chassid. You're a Bosner Chassid, you're also a Lubavitcher. Well, Lubavitcher actually not, because Lubavitcher is exclusive, but Bava, because Bosner Hasidus was supposed to be kind of an umbrella for people who didn't have a regular contact with the official Rebbe. So the Bosner Rebbe, Rav Levi Yitzchak Horowitz, Rav Meir's father, would tell the story that his own father, Rav Pinchas David, who was the first Bosner Rebbe, did believe in corporal punishment. He would hit his children if they didn't behave, but he always waited 24 hours. So if a kid did something that was not proper, they might get a patch, but only 24 hours later. Why? Because the Rebbe said he didn't want to act out of anger. He wanted to act out of cheshbon, that this was the best thing for his child. Because, this is a very strong way of saying it, when a parent hits a child out of anger, that is a form of child abuse, even though it's not severe. What, you're angry, so you hit your child? I mean, if I'm angry, what if I hit you? I mean, it's an avera. So to hit your child is not your property. If I hit my child because I'm angry, it's the same avera as hitting another person because I'm angry. It's an Isser D'Oraisa. Now, Lamai, but as a parent, I do have a responsibility to be Mechanech my child. So whatever it is, I'm not endorsing hitting, but if whatever reason that's considered to be a reasonable chinuch, so for chinuch I can do it. But the Boston Rebbe's father, the first Boston Rebbe said, I have to be absolutely sure I'm not doing it because I'm angry. I'm doing it because it's the best thing for the child. That I think about this. What is the right discipline that a child needs? That's a great thing. That you don't treat your children as victims of whatever negative feelings you have. But discipline, boundaries are very, very appropriate. But you always have to think what is best for the child to grow up into a good adult. And that's the whole cheshbon. If that requires strict discipline sometimes, then that requires strict discipline. But it's never supposed to be. This is very high madrega, I'm asking. It's never supposed to be because I'm mad. Because being angry at your children is no more mutter than being angry to anybody else. Hitting your children is no more mutter than hitting anybody else. Screaming at your children is no more mutter than anybody else. Unless you see in the framework of chinuch, this is a proper thing to do, for whatever the reason. So that's I'm suggesting is David HaMelech. That is the difference with David HaMelech between not hurting Shimi at the moment of the encounter and giving a midas adin against Shimi much later. That's the waiting period. By the way, I once mentioned this to a psychologist, a child psychologist, and she was not in favor of it. She thought there was a problem. I'll mention what the problem is. She said that little children do not have a memory of what they did. So you come up to a kid did something Sunday afternoon. You come up to the kid Monday afternoon and say, pow, whatever it is. The kid's not even going to be able to connect it to what was done earlier, simply because kids don't have memories about like what they did 5 minutes before and the like. So that's an interesting point. So you have to figure out a way to connect the cause and effect when there's a delay of that nature. By the way, as another aside, since we're talking about Shimi ben Gera, we'll come back to this in a moment. Let me just mention that how he was killed was interesting as well. Shlomo HaMelech created a pretense. And the pretense was, don't leave the city. If you leave the city, Damo Barosho, you're going to be Chayiv Misa. And he left the city. Now, he didn't leave the city to go to his mother's funeral or, for some very important job. He left the city for something that was relatively unimportant, looking for his donkeys. Now, he was a rich man and he had servants. Why would he, and he must have figured he was being watched. If Shlomo HaMelech said, the day you leave the city, you're going to get killed, he should have figured that they're watching me. So how could he leave for such a inconsequential reason? So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz used to say that Shlomo HaMelech is being an expert psychologist. And that is, if Shimi wasn't told he couldn't leave, maybe he would never leave. He would send his servants. Once he's told he can never leave the city again, he'll have an unbelievable taiva to leave. Because we hate being confined. We hate being told what we can do. So therefore, by telling him, you can never leave, that guaranteed that he would leave, even for the smallest reason.
Especially like when he has money, like when you're attached to the materialistic aspects.
Yeah.
Somebody tells you that.
Yeah, and says, you can never do it again.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, with dieting. A person decides, I'm never going to eat chocolate again. Well, they will have an immediate desire. And again, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 100 years, let me have some chocolate. Right? And Rav Chaim Shmulevitz said, it is part of the human nature that we don't like to be a mukhrach. We don't like to be forced to do something. Even things I would do had I not been told to do it. Once I'm told to do it, right? The husband that is about to take out the garbage. And as he's taking out the garbage, he hears his wife, I'm not being autobiographical, he hears his wife say, please take out the garbage. So the husband will have a moment, a second. I don't like to be told what to do. Right? We don't like to be a mukhrach. That explains the Taisus in Avodah Zarah, famous Taisus. Very small Taisus. No, the rule is, Chazal say, Gadol ha-mitzvah v'yaisa, mimi she'eino mitzvah v'yaisa. A person who does a mitzvah they're commanded to do gets more reward in Shemayim than a person who does a mitzvah that they're not commanded to do. So, for example, women are exempt from sukkah and lulav, tefillin, because these are time-bound commandments that women are exempt. There are many exceptions, but these are those that are covered by the rule. Now, if a woman sits in a sukkah, will Hashem reward her for it? Yes, yes. If a woman takes lulav, will Hashem reward her for it? Yes. Tefillin, and I mentioned it, I'll mention that separately. Let's put that aside for a moment. So a woman who does a mitzvah that she's exempt from will get reward from Hashem. She won't get punished if she doesn't do it because she's not chayevet, but she'll get reward. But the reward she will get will not be as great as the reward the man gets who's commanded. This is Gadol ha-mitzvah v'yaisa, mimi she'eino mitzvah v'yaisa. So it's not that taking lulav is of no spiritual benefit to a woman. It surely is. But she's an eino mitzvah v'yaisa. Ad kedei kach that there's an interesting machlokes, Ashkenazim and Sfardim, machlokes the Beis Yosef and the Ramah, which is ultimately a machlekes the Rambam and Rabbeinu Tam. If a woman does a mitzvah saseh shazman garama that she is exempt from, but she wants to do it, does she make a bracha on it? If a woman takes a lulav, does she make the bracha al natilas lulav? If a woman sits in the sukkah, does she say the bracha leishei basukah? The Rambam says that even though a woman gets reward for this mitzvah as an eino mitzvah v'yaisa, she cannot make the bracha, because the bracha would be a lie. What does the bracha say? Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvosav b'tzivanu, that God sanctified us and He commanded us to take lulav. God didn't command her. So the Shitas HaRambam and the Shulchan Aruch Paskins like the Rambam is a woman who wants to do a mitzvah saseh shezman garama should not make a bracha. And that's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins, and that's how most Sfardim paskin. Rabbeinu Tam, and this is followed by the Ramah, which becomes the Minhag Ashkenaz, says Ashkenazim do make a bracha, because the statement Asher kiddishanu b'mitzvosav, He sanctified us and commanded us. It's not referring to me as an individual, but the Jewish nation. That's why it's Barabim. So that's a machlokas. The exception is Moroccan. I don't know if anyone here is a Moroccan Sfardi. Anyone Moroccan here? Morocco, this is Ovadia Yosef had his perpetual battle against the Moroccan Sfardim, because Moroccan Sfardim follow many so-called Ashkenazic customs, including making a bracha on mitzvah taseh women, a mitzvah shezman garama. So Rav Ovadia had a thesis which deeply offended the Moroccan rabbinate. They said, well, Morocco didn't have Gedolei Torah, and the only influence in Morocco were Chabad houses, and therefore Chabad taught, in the 50s, way back to the 40s and 50s, they taught Asvardim to follow Ashkenazic customs, and therefore the Moroccans were corrupted by Ashkenazi influences. So the Moroccan rabbinate responded that they were following these practices 1,000 years. They were doing it before there was a Shulchan Aruch. And so it happens to be a coincidence that they're doing like the Ramah, but they are pre-Ramah, pre-Shulchan Aruch, minhagim of very, very ancient vintage. And they point out that Rav Yosef Karo himself writes in the Hakdama to the Beis Yosef that any psak in the Shulchan Aruch is not meant to overturn pre-existing minhagim that were already in effect. So this was an old fight that went on for many, many years because the Moroccan Sfardim were in other words, they were different, meaning Sfardim b'derech klal follow the Rav Yosef Karo. I mean, Moroccans do also, but in many, many places, Moroccan minhagim were the same as the Ramah's Hachra, even not because they were following the Ramah, but that's just the way their psak came out. Yeah.
Why are women chayiv in Halakas there Shabbos?
Okay. So the truth of the matter is, all inyanim of Shabbos, Kiddush, Havdalah, Neiros, are an exception to the Zman Groma exemption, because since Hashem said Shamor and Zochor in one word, and Shamor is the negatives of Shabbos, don't do work. So we have a drasha, anyone that has the negatives of Shabbos also has the positives of Shabbos. So, Einachinami, you're correct. Under general rules, a woman would be exempt, but all of the laws of Shabbos are an exception. In fact, there are many exceptions. By the way, since I touched, forgive me for digressing, but if I mention something, I don't want to leave it ambiguous or unclear. I'm sorry. Let me finish the main point, then I'll go to the peripheral point. Now, so there's this rule, Gadol HaMitzvah V'Yaisa. Now, Tosfos asks the question, shouldn't it be the opposite? If I do a mitzvah I don't have to do, shouldn't I get extra credit? So Tosfos answers, once you have to do something, your Yetzer Hara is very strong. Meaning, if I do a mitzvah I don't have to do, so I feel like a tzaddik, I'm such a great man, I do more than I have to do. But if all I'm doing is what I have to do, my Yetzer Hara says, why bother? An amazing thing. This goes back to Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. As soon as Shimi ben Gera is said he has to do something, he rebels against it. Right? That's the nature. That's why I say, not that I don't want to be elate, but in the Reform movement, there's been a great increase in people putting on tefillin. Baruch Hashem. It used to be no Reform Jew put on tefillin. Now many Reform Jews put on tefillin. That's the good news. The bad news is that the overwhelming majority of the Jews who put on tefillin are women. Meaning there is, in fact, same thing with minyan. Many Reform synagogues now have daily, maybe I shouldn't use the word minyan, but daily services. But the majority of people who make up the minyan are women. Meaning women are more religiously inspired in the Reform movement than men. I would suggest that the answer might be based on Tosfos, since they're not obligated. So they want to do it. When you're obligated, I don't want more obligations on my head. Okay, amazing thing. Now, let me just digress for a moment and talk about tefillin. On one hand, women do have schar for doing a mitzvah saseh shezman gerema. Now, the only reason women are exempt from tefillin is because it's time-bound. You don't wear tefillin on Shabbos. You don't wear it at night. So here's the thing. A woman doesn't have to take lulav, but she might be encouraged to do so, and if she does so, she gets reward. And like Ashkenazim, she even makes a bracha. So why don't I say the same thing about tefillin? Tefillin is Zman Gerama, just like lulav. If a woman wants to put on tefillin, she should do so, and she'll get reward as an Eina Mitzvah V'Yaisa. Why don't you say the same rule? So here the Ramah brings that not only are women exempt from tefillin, but women are not allowed to put on tefillin. And he has to come up with a new reason, because logically that shouldn't be true. But he says tefillin requires a clean body. That's why even if a person has digestive problems or whatever, or has diarrhea, you're not allowed to wear tefillin, etc. And since women have periods and other types of things, so because of guf naki, it's better for them not to wear tefillin. That may be a weak reason, but this is the reason that the Ramah gives. So Lamaisa, the Gemara does say that Michal bas Shaul wore tefillin, and there is a legend that hasn't been substantiated that Rashi's daughters wore tefillin. The bottom line is actually, and maybe I shouldn't say this in Or Sameach, I might get in trouble, is that me'ikar hadin, there is room for a very righteous, meticulous woman to wear tefillin privately. There is such a makom in halacha. The custom is not, but you can't really say it's usher. I mean, the problem is most women who want to wear tefillin are doing so for political reasons, to make statements, and that would be an improper thing. But in fact, I know a woman. She's a very good teacher in Beis Yaakov's here. but she's a balas tshuva. And for many years, she wore tefillin privately. She didn't tell it. I mean, she told me, but she didn't tell anybody. She did it privately. She also used to go daf yomi shir, whatever. But she stopped. She stopped. And she said it was very hard for her to stop. But she came to the point that she wanted to keep the standard minhagim. So the truth is, for that type of situation, halacha might allow it, me'ikar din, and she'll get schar as an eina mitzvah v'yaisa, but not when it's used for a political, feminist purpose. Yeah.
Does everything when like Mashiach comes and the Yitzhak goes out of us and everyone's living in a more idealistic world that the minhag would be that women should put on tefillin?
It may be. I'm not going to call that impossible. It may be such a situation. Okay. By the way, just to end here, the idea that a mitzvah v'yaisa gets more reward than an mitzvah v'yaisa is the makor of why we celebrate bar mitzvahs. Why do we make a sudas mitzvah for a bar mitzvah? Why is a bar mitzvah a joyous occasion? You might say in some ways, gee, it's not a happy occasion. Until I was 13, I could do what I want. Now I got all these restrictions. The answer is no. The mitzvahs you're going to do now are going to count much more. So the Marshal, the Yamshel Shlomo writes that the whole makor of making a festive seudah at a bar mitzvah is based on Gadol HaMitzvah v'yaisa mimi she'ena mitzvah v'yaisa. And that's the simcha. Baruch Hashem, I'm now a mitzvah. So I will get more reward from HaKadosh Baruch Hu for my mitzvahs. Okay, see you.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome Ech production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.